All right, we are good to go. So, Parm, you had a question about staying motivated. Do you just want to run us through that one more time?
Yeah. So I've just applied to several different opportunities. I recently got an interview with a company called Flexport and went through the whole process, but unfortunately it didn't work out and got an email from them saying that it wasn't a good fit. And I'm just curious to know if you have any feedback as to like what's the issue. Is it the resume or is it just the timing and how to just stay motivated in general in the hunt for the dream job?
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question because it can get pretty demoralizing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple things that I do to kind of stay motivated and stay on top of stuff. The first is it's really all about knowing where you want to get to, right? So like what that eventual goal is, because when you think about it, there's a TED talk on this too. Have you heard of Start with Why, the Simon Sinek talk?
Yeah. That's an incredible TED talk.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of cliched at this point, like everybody brings it up, but it really is true that if you know what your why is, it makes it a lot easier to get through like the tough parts. So if you're just like kind of browsing around and looking for a job and you're not really sure what you want to do, you're not really sure like what your end goal is, it's really easy to feel that rejection, right? And really get weighed down by it. But for companies, I think it's easier to think about like why you want to work for Google rather than just saying like, I want to work at Google. Think about why. Like, is it the fact that you'll be doing work that'll impact people? Is it the salary that you'll get paid? Is it the prestige of being able to say that, you work for this place? Or is there one product you're like really, really passionate about and you think that it's going to change the world and that's why you want to work there? Thinking about those things, like that side of it is really, really helpful because that's what's really going to help you, when the tough times like come, and they definitely will, instead of just being like, well, I want to work there because I want to work there. You're like, well, I want to work there because I know I'm going to be having this impact, which is going to change my life, these people's lives, X, Y, Z.
Totally.
So yeah, so that's one thing. The second thing I would say is to just always remind yourself of those goals. So I do a couple things for that. So I do every day, I write down, I actually have it right here. I have a journal where I write down like all my stuff. So every day I have I do the top is like 3 things I'm grateful for. I do an affirmation. I have 30-day goals, 1-year goals, 5-year goals, and then 3 things I'm going to do today to bring me closer to those goals. So that kind of keeps everything top of mind for me. And so when I get like, when I'm not quite in the mood or I get a little bogged down, I go back and I read those goals and I'm like, all right, this is why I'm doing this. Cause 5 years from now, I want X, Y, or Z. And 1 year from now, I want to be here. So that really helps too. And then I also do like, it's called a vision board. People call it a bunch of different stuff that you basically take. I actually have it in the back of the book. It's like pretty potato quality, but so you just do like, I did it in Photoshop, but I threw like all the stuff in here that I want to be doing. So I have, here, we'll just go through it. So I have like, I want to do a TED Talk, Forbes 30 under 30, write for the New York Times, get in there eventually. I have some stuff on like the relationships I built, like my fiance, my friends. We want to get a house in Chatham, which is a place in New Jersey. But I basically write this all out, and then every day I look at it and I'm like, this is why I'm doing this thing that I don't want to be doing right now. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just keeping your eye on the ball at the end of the day, and like you said, knowing your why is all super valuable. So you're definitely right. Definitely some valuable feedback there. And does anyone else have any questions?
Basically, I had a follow-up question in terms of how do you crystallize your vision or come towards a crystal view of it? Because I think right now, for me, the challenge is I've had something about working in video games industry. But in terms of narrowing down the companies, there are like 5 companies that I would like to work for, but kind of then being rejected from one or the other kind of hurts just as much. So I'm not sure how you can crystallize your vision to be like, this is where I want to work for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple of things, and in my mind, it really comes down to what you value most. So there are a lot of offerings, right? So a company could pay you money, they can give you time off, they can give you work that you really care about, they can give you work-life balance or good benefits, health insurance, working with amazing people, like people that actually think like you, challenge you, get you going, etc. So there's all these different things, right? It basically boils down to like the work you do, the culture of the company, and the money you get paid. So prioritizing those is helpful. Then the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to talk to people that are there. So I know you've been reaching out, and I know you've made connections at some of these places. But sometimes like we make those connections and we gear it a lot towards getting the job. But when you're thinking of just how to assess the culture and really understand what that company is all about, et cetera, sometimes it's better to just reach out and be like, hey, I'm just really interested in figuring out what the company is all about, like what you do on a day-to-day basis. And so rather than going like, and you can throw this in there, like you can try and 2-for-1 the conversation. If you feel like this person is somebody who can help you, it can help influence the hiring process, can help you get the job, et cetera. But just go in and be like, I think your story is really cool. I just want to talk to you about it and hear more about what you do on a day-to-day. Like, what projects do you work on? What does life look like in the office at 5 p.m.? Has everybody gone home? Are people like hanging out playing ping pong? Are they going to happy hour? What does it look like if I want to try something new, like outside of my job description? Am I able to just start a project on my own that may not sit like within the confines of this role, or is it pretty strict? And so just by asking all these questions, like, again, not everybody you reach out to is going to be open to it. But that's definitely the best route in my opinion, because by talking to those people, like they actually work there and they'll be able to give you the best sense. The other thing you can do, if you're not getting a lot of response from those people, sometimes stuff can come up, right? They can think like, oh, Farrell just wants a job. And so like, I don't really want to deal with that. Or, maybe they don't want to disclose all the information because they still work there. One thing you can do is, depending on what the company is, you can try and find people who used to work there and then went on to a better role. So like, let's say you work for a startup in New York, but then you went on to work for Microsoft or Google or whatever. Chances are pretty good that you left on good terms, right? Like you probably made that decision to move to a much better company. So you're going to be able to, that person's probably going to give an unbiased opinion of what their experience was like at their previous company. If you talk to somebody who like got fired or laid off or made a lateral move, those people tend to be a little bit more biased. But the best part about reaching out to folks who used to work at the company and now are in a better place is that they don't see an agenda there. If you're like, hey, I'm really considering this company that you used to work for, I just love to know a little bit more about the culture, blah, blah, blah. People will probably be very open to talking about that because they don't think that you're like gunning for a job or only like meeting up with them because you have an agenda. It's a little bit more conversational. So yeah, definitely reaching out to people, talking to them about the culture. Reading stuff online is helpful. Articles can be biased, so you have to be careful about that, but it's definitely good to educate yourself on like the culture that they're projecting in interviews, on their own site if they have a blog or like a publication or anything like that. But yeah, the combination is great. I think it's best to read up beforehand and then try and talk to those people. But once you get a sense of the culture, then you can also, like for the salary piece, you can go to Glassdoor and you can see what the salary ranges are like there. You can probably even ask that person who has now moved on to another company and be like, well, do you know what X sort of roles get paid at this company? Is it competitive? Are they good about that? What do the benefits look like? How meaningful did you think the work was? That the best part about talking to people is that you can ask them all the questions that you would probably try and source from elsewhere, and you'll get very candid answers. And so that may make your decision easy, or it may make it a little tougher, right? Like if you hear amazing things about a couple companies, then you may have to, but it's a good problem to have. You may have to make that decision, or, it may make it very clear cut and you just want to work at X, Y, or Z. So that's definitely what I'd recommend. I'd say the last factor to consider, using it there as a stepping stone. So basically the company that you want to work for, you want it to be a stepping stone to the next role or your next goal that you want to get. So like if my goal for me personally, like when I wanted to work at a Google or Microsoft or a Facebook or whatever, I knew I couldn't get there immediately right after I transitioned from the medical field because I didn't have the experience. I only had 9 months of work history and it wasn't in digital. And so that wasn't very feasible. So I worked at 2 companies in between, and both of those companies I made a point to be like, okay, if I work here, I'm going to get X, Y, and Z experience, which is what I'm going to need to get to the next step and work for Google, work for Microsoft, et cetera. So for me, that was actually the number one thing that I focused on. I didn't really mind the pay. The time off and the flexibility was a little bit more important. And the people that I worked with was a little less important. But basically my goal is I knew that if I went to this place and they offered me a job, I could get that experience. I would eventually land me a job at Google or Microsoft. So your priorities may be different. That's just what it was like for me. Does that help?
For sure. That was definitely very comprehensive. Thank you.
Awesome. No problem. All right. Anne, I saw your question pop up. So I'll just read it out loud here. So you asked this before, and you said you're interested in hearing about how you juggle multiple offers simultaneously and decide on the best one. So how do you keep multiple offers on the table for an extended period of time? Great question. And several Fortune 500 tech companies offered me positions. Why didn't I settle for the first one? And what criteria did I use for making my decision? So this is all great. The fantastic questions. I can give you my personal experience, and I can give you like a broader scope. So for me, I was interviewing at Google. I got to the final round. I got a call from the recruiter, and they said that they wanted to give me an offer. And then basically what they do, the way Google's process works is you go through the rounds of in-person interviews. And then at the end, you get a verbal offer. And then what they do is they create this whole package about you. And it's like 30 pages. My first thought was like, I don't have 30 pages worth of interesting stuff. So like, good luck with that. But they try to package it all together, send it to like an unbiased committee of like 4 or 5 people that work across Google. So like different departments, different title levels, different levels of experience. And basically that unbiased, objective third party decides whether you're a good fit or not. So they said that I had everything in line, but they like really didn't like my GPA because it was terrible in college. And so they kept hounding me about it. And so Microsoft offered me this job a short while later, and I'd been interviewing. So I wrote a post on this on LinkedIn. You might have seen it, but basically like I was interviewing at Google for 7 months, and they kept bringing me in and kept saying like, you don't have enough experience. You don't have enough experience. Like, prove to us, blah, blah, blah. And so after 7 months, like Microsoft took me through their interview process, and it was about a week and a half. And I interviewed with 5 different people, and then they're like, we want you. And so like that was a pretty easy decision for me, because do I want to go to the company that kept telling me I wasn't good enough, or do I want to go through the company that had me for a week and a half and was like, you're awesome, we like you, we want to take you. So that was a pretty easy decision for me. Twitter, I was in the final round with them when I got the interview from Microsoft, and I told them I'd be happy to come in the interview for the next day. But they said they had another week there, so I just dropped out of the process because I only had 24 hours to say yes or no to Microsoft. So I ended up saying yes, and here I am. So that's my personal story. In terms of how you juggle multiple offers and handle that on your own, it really depends on the scenario. So first of all, that's a really good problem to have. If you do have multiple offers on the table, a lot of the chips fall in your lap. So if you really want an offer from somebody, and let's say they gave you a salary that was a little bit low, or the PTO wasn't quite where you wanted it to be, or maybe they're not very flexible about working from home, or any of these things, you can go back to them and then you can say, hey, I'm being considered at other places for a very competitive offer. I'd love to work for you guys. I'm really, I'm very excited and invested and interested in X, Y, and Z things about your company and what we talked about during this process. Is there any way that you can bump the salary up? Or can I get an extra week of paid vacation? Or, I have this thing going on at home that I need to be home for twice a week. Can I work from home twice a week? So it gives you a lot of room to negotiate. And it's way better than only having one, because a lot of people are not very comfortable negotiating. And so when you have stuff to fall back on, it sort of empowers you a little bit to go after more than you probably would have. And the data shows that people who actually go out and negotiate, first of all, the chances of something terribly bad happening are very small. And most people actually end up with more than they expect or ask for. So it's nice because it kind of pushes you out of your comfort zone. But if you're in a situation where, like, let's say you get an offer from a company and you have 24 hours to think it over. And you know, this other interview is coming up 3 days later or something, and you need to bridge that gap. The best thing to do is to go back to the original company and thank them for the offer, tell them it's fantastic, and just try to come up with some plausible excuse as to why you need to get a couple extra days. So that could be, you know, I need to talk this over with my boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, but she's out of town and is flying back in a couple days. She's like offline at a conference. Would it be possible to do X, Y, or Z? You know, we like to make these decisions together. You could say that, you know, you're traveling, you're going out of town, you're going to a conference, and anything that you can come up with that's sort of plausible. Nobody's really going to check you on it. You may run into a situation where they just say, no, you have to make the decision in 24 hours. And so if you can buy the time, great. Then what I would do is go to that second company after you have the interview. I would go through the whole interview first. And then at the end, I would just let them know, hey, thanks so much for having me in. I'm really, really excited about this opportunity. Just to let you know, I do have this other offer on the table from, you don't have to mention the company. You can just say you have another offer on the table and it's compelling, but you know, you're still very interested in what they're offering you. And just leave it at that. You don't want to turn down. I really don't advocate for turning down any offer, even if you don't think you're going to work for the company at all. I would still go through. You can always say no after they give you the offer. So it's best to see all of your options laid out on the table and then make a decision from there. If you are stuck in the position where the company won't give you the time limit extension, what I would do is go back to the company with your interview that's a couple days later and just tell them the situation. Be like, look, guys, I have this offer. It's a great, it's competitive. It looks great. I'm excited about it from this other company. However, I do have a few concerns about X, Y, and Z. And something that I've really loved about you guys is, you know, A, B, C. And I'm really, really excited about this opportunity. And if given the chance, I would probably accept an offer from you guys, if that's truly the case. And then be like, you know, I have 24 hours to make this decision. Is there any way that I could come in tomorrow morning and interview, or interview over the phone? Or is there any way that we can make this happen? So basically, at the end of the day, it's really just trying to juggle and rework things to make it fit the schedule that these companies have given you. A lot of times, if companies do really want you, they're happy to make the adjustment. If in some cases it's not possible, like if people give you a hard 24-hour deadline, that's kind of what happened with Twitter and Microsoft for me. So Microsoft said I had a 24-hour deadline. I told them, you know, thanks. I'd love to consider it for a little bit. And I'm also still interviewing at some other places. Is it okay if I have, you know, 48 or 72 hours? And they were like, no, sorry, we only give out 24-hour windows. So I basically had the choice because Twitter told me that they couldn't interview me earlier. I had to wait another week for them to interview some people. And then the final round would be the following week. So I could basically accept the Microsoft offer that I had, or I could say no to Microsoft and I could go and, you know, try my chances at Twitter. So I ended up in that situation and I had to make a decision, and I made what I think was the right decision. And I'm very happy with it, but sometimes it can get tough like that. The best thing you can do is, again, just negotiate. Like, you never know unless you ask. And you're usually going to get what you ask for. You'd be surprised. So I would just say, you know, push back on the company, push the onus back to them, and see what you can make happen.
Hey, I had a question in the chat, and I'll just read it through now.
Okay.
I said, the question was kind of piggybacking off of what you talked about, Mike, that you had to go from medicine. You had to do 2 sequential companies until you could land in Google. My question is, to build anything really cool and awesome takes a lot of time and effort, but there's also a balance between sequential iterations to build that thing and avoiding certain steps because they're unnecessary. For instance, building a project instead of just blindly shooting your resume. My question is, how do you differentiate between those 2 types of steps? Steps that are necessary to build something really cool and awesome, and steps that are more unnecessary that your process and other processes try to eliminate and make more efficient?
Yeah, definitely. That's a fantastic question. And this goes beyond just job searching. Like, that's a very good,
like an 80-20 rule type thing, yeah, how it applies here.
Totally. Because the classic example is like with entrepreneurship. people go out and they like they get a logo, they hire a designer, they get their business cards, they make a website, and they spend all this money, and then like they don't even have a customer, like a validated idea or anything like that, right? So the same thing goes with job searching. Like there's a lot of stuff you can do that makes you feel good. You can update your resume, but you can do it like by following 6 different gurus' advice and then like swapping stuff in and out and wondering, you know, like, is this one little piece in here correct or not? Or you can go out and spend that time building relationships, right? And then the resume doesn't matter nearly as much.
Sure.
So the best way to figure that out, in my opinion, is to kind of get a roadmap from somebody who's been there. So what I did personally was when I was in medicine, I built out a list of criteria, and I basically said, you know, I want to be talking to people that live in a big city like New York or LA. They're working for a leading tech company like Google or Microsoft. They're making over 6 figures and they're under the age of 26. That was my criteria. So I went out and I found as many people as I could, and I just hit them all up via cold email, hopped on the phone with a lot of them, and I asked them, I'm like, hey, you know, we had a whole conversation. Usually my last question would be, you know, if you're in my shoes, no digital experience, wanting to get into a sales role at one of these companies, like the place that you currently work, what would you do? Like, what steps would you take? And I was actually reading a book over New Year's. It's called High Performance Habits. It was pretty good. But one thing that he said in there that really resonated with me was basically, he said that exact same thing, but he said 5 steps is what he looked for. So basically, what 5 steps can I take to get from where I am now to where I want to be? And then you find people who are in that position where you want to be, and you basically ask them that. So that's 100% what I would recommend. Then I would like take all of their information that they give you, and I would just look for where the patterns are. You're definitely going to get some funky suggestions from some people that worked. You know, could be situational, environmental, based on like everybody's got different experience, different background that they're bringing to the table. So I'd look for the common threads that happened across people, and then I would build that into your plan and just operate off of that.
So a follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
Because it's a balance between trying to figure out what's necessary, what are those steps, because there's going to be commonalities, as you said, and also which steps can we remove. And one kind of habit I found is people tell sometimes what worked for them. So let's say someone went to get a consulting job, they went to business school, and they said, okay, if I were your positions, I would do X, I would do Y, I'd go to business school, and then I get this position. But that's often, I like using, I think that sometimes frameworks are more effective, because otherwise people just tell you this is what worked for me, but that might not work for you. How do you kind of poke holes in our logic and try to distill which elements were really necessary, then which might have been a little bit, I don't know, just not completely directly relevant to the task? Like, how do you filter out the bias of me telling you personally what worked for me because it was what worked with me, and kind of remove that and find really the essence? I'm just trying to think about if you can make this more effective. Sorry, it's a little bit of a nuanced follow-up.
No, it's a great question. And that's a great point. So what I would say right off the bat is just start by narrowing your search. So one of the things that I did was I tried to find people who worked in an industry that was not technology before they ended up at Google, Microsoft, et cetera. And also didn't go to a graduate program. That was something I wasn't going to spend the money to go get an MBA or to go get whatever else. I just didn't want to do that, and I didn't think it was worth it. And that's just my personal opinion. But so I found people who worked in the science fields, some sort of STEM, and then made their way over to tech. And that's who I tried to hone in on. But anything else works. I mean, somebody who's coming from medicine or somebody who's coming from like, I don't know, like
just any field that's not directly tech.
Exactly. Finding that person and then talking to them, you can see, like, that's why LinkedIn's beautiful, because you can see their history. So you can be like, you know, this person did not go to business school, yet they work at Google and they used to be a clerk at, you know, CVS or whatever 5 years ago. How did that happen? And so narrowing your search in and the type of people that you target is definitely the best way to do that. On top of it, I would say, again, like just seeing the commonalities. I think the key is figuring out the people that you talk to and making sure that they fit the mold that you want to match. And then again, zoning in on the commonalities with them is great because of exactly what you're saying. Like somebody who's like dad worked at, you know, this company and knew the other CEO and he got them a job, like that's not very relevant to you. So if that's what he suggests, like, hey, like get a dad who knows a guy, like, all right, cross that off. But what were some of the other things that you did that you had in common with the guy who worked at CBS but now works at Google? And then if those two vastly different backgrounds both did the same thing and they said it was successful, chances are that's probably going to work for you too. For the stuff that's on the border, like it's never going to be perfect either. Like you're not going to,
sure, of course.
Yeah, so you're going to be able to, in that it's personal preference at that point. Like if you think something sounds cool and you think you can execute it well, like definitely go ahead and do it. I mean, some of the stuff that I threw in, like that value add vault where people came up with those, basically like interesting creative ways to land dream jobs, like buying Facebook ads or like mimicking.
Those were awesome. Right?
Yeah, I had so much fun researching that because people did like amazing stuff, right? Like I'd never thought of half of that, and it's so cool to see how people executed it. And if you were talking to them, like that's not going to be a commonality with anybody else, right? So, sure. But it sounds cool. So if you think like if you see Nina's project where she mimics Airbnb's website, and you're like, oh, I want to work for this company that has a similar model, and I'm pretty decent at web development, like that could work for you. So that's more of like just knowing yourself and knowing what might work. And then I would pair that with the foundation of all the common stuff that people did across the base that you talked to.
I guess it's a balance. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for the conversation. Hope the good questions keep coming.
Awesome. Thanks, Alexander. Talk to you soon, man.
All right. Okay, bye.